Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fast Times, where we talk about everything San Francisco. We talk about politics. We talk about the national landscape, the Democratic Party, what's happening with the current administration in Washington, D.C. And we also talk a little bit about ourselves and share our journeys and our personal stories of how we got here. And today we have a very, what I like to think is an intimate interview with Adam Nathan, who's my co-host. Who is the CEO and founder of Blaze AI in San Francisco. And as you all know, AI is kind of the next big thing that's coming. And he's right out in front of it. But he's also very involved with what's going on in San Francisco in regards to politics, policy. And he was very active leading up to the last election in November, especially on social media and speaking out. And he's become a really strong voice in San Francisco, promoting what I think are really good ideas, really pragmatic ideas that focus on building, focus on infrastructure. And it's just funny how, sometimes some people will just go through their whole life and not speak out about stuff, but I really appreciate and respect it when people put themselves out there and put themselves on the line to speak up for the betterment of their community. So I present to you Adam Nathan. Adam, nice to see you, man.
Well, thanks for having me on the pod, Tom.
So you and I met maybe about 2 years ago now, I think. Yeah. And then we kind of started collaborating on a few things maybe about a year ago or so. And now it's kind of brought us to this moment here where we're doing this podcast together. And we're both kind of, speaking out pretty fiercely on social media about the state of San Francisco and trying to improve it. So I just got to ask you, we can get into personal stuff, which I'll ask you about, how you arrived at San Francisco, but what was the catalyst? Is there one thing that you can point to that made you decide that you wanted to get involved in making San Francisco a better city for all of us?
These are going to be hard questions. I don't know if there's one moment. I feel like part of it is just who I am. I've always been a person who has evaluated my success in life by the impact I have on others, the change I make in the world. I've always been this way since college. And my background is in politics and the nonprofit space. Right after undergrad, I worked in the White House. And then I moved to San Francisco for the first time and worked for a nonprofit consulting firm called Bridgespan. And now I work in startups. But even the company I run now, Blaze, our business helps entrepreneurs and freelancers and creators make more money from the internet and have more control over their lives and achieve their dreams. And so even in the for-profit space, I wake up every morning excited to help other people be the best version of themselves. And so I think this is just, I look at my friend Stephen Sherrill, who is now the supervisor for District 2 in San Francisco, and just watching him, I see how tough his job is and how much bullshit he probably wouldn't say this, I'm sure he loves his constituents, but how difficult the job is to just represent people and listen to their concerns and reflect that in his own positions. And it comes so naturally to him. And I was thinking about how some people are just meant to do certain things. They have a certain purpose in life. And I just think that wherever I was going to live, whatever I was going to do, I would always have been this version of myself. Like, this is who I am. And so it's hard for me to look at the state of things and not do something. I am so fortunate to have grown up with two loving parents in a household where I had every opportunity. I was able to go to college. I'm privileged in any demographic way you can imagine. And so to me, not doing something is an abdication of my responsibility. It's one thing if I was just struggling to make ends meet. Thankfully, I'm not. And I think even people who do, many Americans, still give back and push things forward. But I feel like for who I am and all the abilities I have, the opportunities I have, it would be a crime to not try and do something when I see a problem. And so it's just, it's just who I am in my bones.
You grew up in New York, right?
Yeah.
That's where you're from. When did you come out here, and what made you decide to make the journey across country to San Francisco?
Yeah. I decided I wanted to move to San Francisco in college. I was actually sitting at a party my freshman year of college, maybe even like the first or second week of college. I was pretty drunk sitting on a lawn with my best friend, and we made a pact to move to San Francisco after college. And after that, it was just like, I'm moving to San Francisco. And I didn't have a job. It was just like, oh, this is where I should be. I had visited San Francisco a couple times when I was a kid, and just fell in love with the city. And this was even before the tech boom. This was just like Full House San Francisco, Mrs. Doubtfire San Francisco. It just seemed like a beautiful place that was sunnier and warmer and more positive in many ways than where I grew up. There was no like rhyme or reason. It just felt like the place I should be. I ski a lot, I surf, I love wine. And so a lot of my hobbies as an adult, I think, align with the lifestyle we have here that we get to enjoy, very fortunately, in California. But yeah, in college, I was like, I'm moving to San Francisco. And then junior and senior year came around and I started only looking at jobs. That's not true. I looked at jobs in New York. I got a ton of offers in New York, but I was like, I want to be in California. And so I focused on a lot of the opportunities I found out here. And then fortunately, I found a consulting firm. I found a job here and moved here. But it's one of these strange things where it's not like I went through an intellectual process to decide to move to San Francisco and I weighed the pros and cons versus New York or Chicago or Miami or London. I feel like a lot of the key decisions I've made in my life have been gut decisions, just things that feel right. And San Francisco is a big one.
Wow. Overall, like, you got here, what, maybe 2010?
2010, yeah.
2010. So what are maybe three of the biggest changes, good or bad, that you've seen happen to San Francisco in the last 15 years? And what do we need to do to either improve upon them, turn it around? What do you think?
Yeah, well, when I moved to San Francisco, I wasn't working in tech. I was working as a nonprofit consultant. And I think I was at the start of this major economic boom that San Francisco experienced basically from 2010 to 2020, that was fueled by social media apps and mobile apps, the rise of the iPhone and the economy that developed around products that leveraged mobile services. A lot of my college friends started to go to work at Google and work at Facebook, and with us began this explosion of young people who moved to San Francisco to find jobs, often very high paying, promising jobs. And what I didn't realize at the time when I was in my early 20s is the reason that was happening is because these companies that were located in the South Bay of south of San Francisco, that's where Facebook was located, that's where Google was located. They weren't building enough housing for all the jobs that they were creating there. And so the jobs actually were located south of the city in Mountain View or Palo Alto. But because there was no room there, it started to push people to live into the city. And of course, San Francisco as a city is a much nicer place than living in the suburbs of San Jose. And so we were kind of the first cohort of people to move to San Francisco, like in large numbers. And then with residents started to come the businesses. And so both startups as well as big tech companies moved their offices to San Francisco to be closer to where people were living. And so that's the reason San Francisco saw a boom. It actually was because of a housing shortage in the broader Bay Area. At the time, I didn't realize this. I just wanted to live in San Francisco, and my friends did too. But seeing San Francisco become really the tech hub, it's not Silicon Valley anymore, it's San Francisco proper. That's been a huge change, both for the region, but also the world. There is no better place to start or grow a company in the whole world than San Francisco. I think the next best place maybe is, Boston or New York or Austin, but it's like several standard deviations worse than San Francisco. If you want to start a business, if you want to get into tech, you have to move to San Francisco. And that became true in the 2010s, and it's actually still true today, even post-COVID. And so I think that's awesome to live in a place that is the center of the world for the industries that are driving us forward, whether it's AI or autonomous vehicles. We have Uber is now bigger than Lyft in San Francisco, and I used to work at Lyft. And so their market share is actually higher now after only operating for 2 years in the city. And so we are a place where if you want to experience the future first, you move here. And so that's super cool. I think in parallel, and this is what has been so confounding living here, is despite all of the economic wealth and all the opportunities and the futuristic technologies that have been on the rise since I lived here, we have also experienced a corresponding rise in homelessness and crime and petty theft, and that's why I got involved, because I didn't understand how it is possible to have so much money so much wealth, so much job growth, more than any other place in the whole world. Maybe even like across all of history. This is one of the largest economic boons ever for a city to experience. And to have that happen at the same time that street conditions were getting so much worse, where it's impossible to walk down a block without stumbling over a needle or human feces or a person. That San Francisco was a cleaner, safer place, at least it felt that way in 2010, than certainly in 2020 and even today. And so, it's San Francisco is kind of there's a saying, as California goes, so goes the nation. I think as San Francisco goes, so goes the nation. And it's strange to be in a place that is kind of a leader, both in the biggest opportunities of our time, as well as our greatest challenges as a society. And I have experienced that as a resident over the last 15 years.
So you said earlier that you had a chance to work in the White House, I guess, before you moved out to California. So you were exposed to, I guess that was during the Obama administration, right?
At the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning. So you got a chance to kind of see maybe good government at work, under the Obama administration. I think people generally feel that like he was a good president and kind of ran a tight ship, especially with all the upheaval that and all the revelations that we're finding out now about President Biden's administration. And now, of course, we have Trump. So there's everyone kind of, I think, has fatigue, right, from all of that. But I definitely noticed that in San Francisco. Like when I started advocating in earnest in 2019 and on, I really got the sense that there were a lot of people in elected office in San Francisco that were very much interested in specific ideological goals or their own interests, right? Or protecting their own little district almost as like a fiefdom, as opposed to the betterment of San Francisco. What are some of the kind of the contrasts or some of the things that you noticed in San Francisco that you found out in your advocacy work that you've done the last couple of years about our elected officials, and how does that contrast to actually how good government should be run?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna, if I ever run for office or something, someone's gonna find this interview and hold it against me. President Obama is a good man. He was a great leader. He pushed our country forward, but I actually think in many ways he was a disappointment, especially to young people, to millennials. I think what he promised, at least what I heard in the campaign, and I initially was a Hillary supporter, but I became an Obama supporter because he promised change we can believe in. He promised a different way of solving problems. I think that's why he was able to rally so much of the country around him, even independents and moderate Republicans, because he wasn't just promising the standard Democratic slate of policy ideas in the campaign. He was promising a new way of working together. And I think it was disappointing to see how, when he was in office, how he actually governed. And people brought this up with him in interviews, and they were like, "Well, what about hope and change?" And he's like, "Well, change was enacting democratic priorities." And I don't think that he read the room the right way there. And so I think people just, it's great that we have Obamacare. It's great that we have gay marriage. But I don't think that's not what people were electing him for at the time. And I think because he as a president didn't actually solve the key challenges of our time at a national level, which to me are helping everybody in society, the top, the middle, the bottom, get ahead through better access to higher quality, low cost housing and healthcare and childcare, the public goods that help us live better. He didn't do it. There was a huge backlash against him and Democrats generally, and that elected Trump. And then Trump didn't do it. And so there's a backlash against Trump, and we got Biden, and Biden didn't do it. So now we're back to Trump, and Trump's not going to do it again. So we're going to elect another Democrat. But I think both parties haven't figured out a way to govern that reflects like the way the 21st century works, reflects the nature of the challenges we face, and how we have to solve them. And so we have these institutions that are like outmoded for the world we live in now. And I think the problem with the current Democratic Party is we are now the defenders of these institutions. And I think Trump, to some degree, is right to attack them as ineffective. But we know that as good as Trump is at diagnosing problems, he's not someone who knows how to build things or solve problems. He never has in his entire career. He puts his name on shit, but he doesn't actually solve things. And so I am not hopeful that Trump is going to fix this either. I mean, I wish him well, but he hasn't yet. He just keeps tearing shit down. But I think, Democrats as well as Republicans are just like stuck in these ideological positions, I think based on interest groups that don't reflect like results and data and empirical evidence of what works and what doesn't. And I think what people want isn't an ideological government. They want a government that works for them, that's able to provide for the basics, things like housing and low cost groceries and a good school where your kid can get great education and healthcare to take care of you when you're sick. That's not too expensive, and childcare so that you can go to work. These are the basic elements of life that help people achieve their dreams and their hopes and their desires. I don't think people want government to get in your way. I don't think people want government to make things more complicated. I think they want government to just provide a foundation for you to live a great life. And I don't think either party has done that, not at a national level. And I think San Francisco is, as it always is, an extreme, like perverse example of this, where during the 2010s, everybody in City Hall, the mayor, the board of supervisors, were so high on their own supply and basically riding on all these tax dollars that were generated by new residents and by tech companies that they invested a ton of money really inefficiently in programs that like not just didn't work, but actively caused harm to the city. And then when COVID came around, all of that harm was exposed. And then a lot of people here realized that the the cost of living in San Francisco were greater than the benefits. And then when a ton of people left the city, the real nature of our problems was exposed. And it's taken people like me and you to recommit to the city and help clean it up.
Do you think, I mean, we touched on this. I mean, there's kind of this general vibe shift, I guess, the last few months, but at the same time, I want to temper some of those good vibes. They're real, they're legit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, crime has dropped, which is a good thing, but we still have this unrelenting homeless crisis in San Francisco and an unrelenting drug crisis in San Francisco. And now it turns out that, the drug trade, as we all know, is controlled by, this kind of leads us to talk a little bit about immigration. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
But look, the drug trade in San Francisco is controlled by people that are here as a result of the Sinaloa cartel. It's been pretty well established. They're mostly from Honduras. They're mostly undocumented. Last year, Supervisor Dorsey tried to introduce legislation an ordinance that would have amended our sanctuary city policy to include people that were convicted of felony drug dealing as being eligible to be turned over for deportation. And at the time, he got shouted down and voted down 10-1, right? And then it seemed like, maybe kind of things were changing, but then Trump comes into office and now you've got ICE showing up at court.
Yeah.
And taking undocumented immigrants showing up to immigration court into custody and deporting them. And nobody seems to like that, right? So it almost seems like to bring that up again, you would immediately get branded as a fascist. So what can, if anything, we do? And we touched on it with Brooke Jenkins a little bit, but I'll ask you kind of what you asked me last week. If you could wave a magic wand in San Francisco, like what would you do to kind of mitigate the drug crisis? Because we talk a lot about treatment and getting people into recovery, which I support, as I'm one of those people. But man, we still have 500, 600, 700 organized drug dealers on the street. And they're the ones that are driving the majority of this chaos. How do we fix that?
Yeah, well, I think people want simple solutions. And I think ideological positions are often very simple to understand and easy to get behind. Like freeze the rent or build the wall. But reality is more complicated than ideological positions would allow for on either side. And so I tend to approach these things from first principles of, let me go talk to people who are affected by these. Because if I'm not a client or a customer myself, I need to go talk to people who have firsthand experience with the problem. And then through first principles and basic reasoning, come up with my own perspective on the issue. And I think that's what's so fun about getting involved in local politics, is that it's not my day job. And I think professional politicians have an incentive to toe the party line so that they can get the seat ahead of theirs because it's their career. And I think that's actually a problem. I don't think we should have professional politicians. We should have people who represent the people, because I think once it's your job, again, you have reasons to not follow logic or not follow data. And I've spoken to hundreds of people who have experienced homelessness, who are in recovery or suffering from addiction. And, what I've learned is that like someone recently said to me, addicts are going to addict. Like if you want to use, you're going to find a way to use. And often what instigates a behavior change is someone hitting rock bottom, which either means you find yourself in a hospital bed or you find yourself in a jail cell. And for a lot of people, that is as bad as it gets before something like death. And so I think if we want to clean up our streets, I think on one side we have to incentivize people to make a different choice with their lives. And I think for a lot of people that is going to mean an encounter with law enforcement. Like to me, it's it's crazy that we let people use drugs on the street and then like commit other crimes and make life worse for the rest of us. Like that's just crazy. A lot of this is about what kind of society do we want to live in? What do we want our city to be like? And I don't want to live in a city where parents are afraid to take their kids on the sidewalk or people are afraid to be out late at night because of other people's behaviors. We don't let people drive drunk or even drive without wearing a seatbelt. And so I think there should be other behaviors that we decide collectively are not okay. And to me, using drugs openly and then committing misdemeanors is one of those. And so I think that we should we should give people, I don't know, 3 strikes or even just 1 strike before they are faced with the choice of jail time or treatment. And then I think on the other side, I think we should be arresting drug dealers. Like, to me, that seems obvious. We need to, that's not okay to me either, to have people who are facilitating suffering on the street. And I think that the whole system is broken if police officers don't have an incentive to arrest people because they know that dealer is just going to spend 24 hours in jail, or a judge is going to like wave them off and let them go back to the street. Like that's fucking crazy. And yeah, to me, a lot of this is about what kind of city do we want to live in? What's important for us? What kind of values do we want San Francisco to represent? What's okay, therefore, and what's not okay? And so I think there should be, I think where there's a will, there's a way. And you asked me what I would do if I had a magic wand. I would quickly build several thousand bed shelters in tents. We do this for natural disasters. After hurricanes or tornadoes, we're able to quickly put a lot of people inside and give them access to basic healthcare services and food, and clean water and clothes. I think we should move everybody inside as quickly as possible. I think people who don't want to move inside should be given a choice between treatment or jail. I think there shouldn't be leniency. And then people who are inside, I think that we should help address their conditions. I think a lot of people, addiction is often a response to trauma. It's like a behavioral condition. And so I think the right response to addiction, the right response to a behavioral condition is not to like feed the addiction. It's treatment. It's recovery. And I think we need to help the people who, have experienced so much pain or trauma in their life that they cannot hold down a job. They cannot remain housed. They cannot stay connected to their family. They are so far down the line that they are out on the street. I think they need extra help and extra support. And I think we should be incentivizing treatment and recovery. We should make it really attractive. We should make it free. We should make it Disneyland. If you align with the values that we as a society think are good, like we should give you all of our support. And I would be happy to give you all my taxpayer dollars. And if you don't, I think you should pay you should pay the consequences. And so that's, to me, what I just said. I know that's going to sound radical to a lot of people, but to me, it's just common sense. It's like what a normal person would recommend. And to me, it is perverse and fucked up that we have a political system that would call me an extremist for some of the stuff I just said, rather than a reasonable person who's just trying to make their city better.
Should we freeze the rent, Adam?
Absolutely not. Terrible policy idea. Terrible.
Because there's a guy, a Democratic socialist, running for mayor of New York. And, a month ago, he was 30 points behind in the polls. And now he's in single digits of catching Cuomo to be the front runner to be mayor of New York. And aside from all the other tension that's happening in New York, his mainstay policy is freeze the rent. What would happen to a city like New York or San Francisco if they truly followed through and froze the rent for people?
It's a complicated question, but to simplify it, anyone who's been to a basic economics class knows that more supply means lower prices. The whole problem with tariffs, right, is that by cutting off access to soap and shampoo and toilet paper from China, we're going to have less of it, so you're going to pay more for it. Same thing is true with housing. The less housing we have, the more expensive it is. And the thing with housing is that housing is kind of the, the a cost that leads to other costs. And so if we don't have enough housing in San Francisco or New York, firefighters and teachers and people who make your coffee in the morning, they pay more in rent, and so they can't live in the city. Or the people that the coffee shops and the stores and the businesses that do employ those people have to pay them more money to afford their rent. So basically, the cost of everything goes up. Wages, everything gets more expensive because housing is expensive. And so this is a basic truth. It should not be controversial that the more housing we have, the cheaper life gets, which is, I think, what everybody wants in this country. And you see this in city after city. Minneapolis is one of the only cities in the country that built a lot of housing during COVID. Minneapolis saw, I think, like a 40% drop in rent during COVID. Austin recently has been on a tear of building housing. And Austin, despite having a huge economic boom where tech jobs moved from California to Texas, Austin has seen like a 20% drop in rents. It is not controversial that more housing means lower rent, more affordability for buyers as well.
So what's their argument then? Like, why does that have so much appeal, and what is the logic behind the idea of freeze the rent?
Well, I think if the pie feels like it's stagnant or shrinking, you want to get the biggest slice you possibly can as an individual. And I think actually both parties have been debating over the last 20 years, like who should get what slice of a shrinking pie. Donald Trump says it's Native Americans or white people or straight people or people that don't hate Jews. Democrats say it's certain groups that are historically discriminated against. But both are offering solutions about how do we divide a shrinking pie. I think the other solution here is just to grow the pie so that everybody gets more. And so I think if you think that neither party is going to grow the pie for you, and that we live in a world with declining returns that are going to be zero sum, divided up at the end of the day, freeze the rent feeling of like to say like, well, at least I'm gonna get mine. I don't have to pay more in rent. The other solution though is to build more housing. The problem with freezing the rent is that, and this is like very technocratic, is that it freezes liquidity in the housing market. If your rent is frozen, and rent control is good in some isolated cases, but if you do it across an entire city, what ends up happening is that no one has an incentive to leave their apartment because they're paying the rent that they got. And so if no one leaves their apartment, then there's even less supply on the market for new people to come in. And so that raises the prices actually for the remaining units that are left. And so it just freezes the entire inventory in a place. This actually is happening in California, and it's been happening for the last 40 years due to Prop 13, where in California, homeowners pay the tax rate of the year they bought their home. And so if you bought your home, and there's an article yesterday about this $10 million home in the Presidio that is paying like $300,000 in property taxes, like basically fucking nothing because they bought the home in 1973. And so if you have an incentive, a very powerful incentive to never leave your home because wherever you move to next is going to have a super high tax rate, then there's no homes for people to buy, and that's going to drive up the prices. And that's especially true if you lived in your home a long time. You're probably older. You probably don't have as much money anymore. You may be retired, and so you have even less of an incentive to leave. And so we have this. That's why this idea of price controls applied to a whole market is a terrible idea, because it does the opposite of what people think it's going to do. It doesn't lower. It may lower your rent in your current apartment, but it's going to raise your rent if you want to move. It's going to raise your rent. It's going to raise the rent of anyone else who wants to move to a city, and that's going to lead to less opportunity for you.
So let's talk about the potential ripple effects, right? So let's say this guy gets elected mayor of New York, right? And let's say the city council, which has quite a few Democratic socialists on it in New York City, if I'm not mistaken, goes ahead and agrees, and they pass a rent freeze in the city. Over the next 4 years, what do you think? Just tell me, kind of paint a picture for me of what New York's going to look like.
Well, I think like with a lot of these things, you don't see impact immediately. It's like California or Hawaii, where over 10 or 20 years, you start to see the impact of higher prices on something as important as housing. I think the question is also under Mayor Adams, who I generally don't like because I don't think he's a good person, but he did pass one of the largest increases in housing in New York City history, I think last year. And so the question is, do they continue to build that housing in New York, or do they stop that plan too? Cuomo, for example, wants to amend that plan and reduce the number of units that they're going to build, which would be a huge problem. But so let's assume that these people, they freeze the rent and they don't build any new housing. That means that if you are in a rental unit, you'd probably be fine. But let's say you start dating someone and you want a bigger apartment, or let's say you have a kid and you go out to look for an apartment. Everything that you look at is going to be really, really expensive, and it's probably going to be lower quality than what you think. It's like the Soviet Union. Like we've tried this philosophy before, like at a country level, at a state level. It never fucking works because you're going to go look. It's like looking at the shelves in a supermarket and being like, hey, like these eggs are cracked and the bread's moldy and it costs $20. Like what the fuck? And so that's what it's gonna look like in a housing supply. So then you're not gonna leave your apartment because you're gonna be like, well, yeah, what I have is too small and it's not good enough, but I can't find anything better. And then if you probably eventually if you're forced to move, you probably will leave the city. You probably move to the suburbs where it's cheaper, or to a different city, maybe in the Sun Belt, like Charlotte or Atlanta or Nashville, where you can get
or Florida,
yeah, Texas, where you can get value for your money because
Right.
they build housing in those places. And then let's say the real victim, I think, in a lot of these housing shortages are the people who can't move to New York because there's no housing for them in the first place. And so that's young people, that's teachers, that's firefighters, that's police officers. You know why there's a police shortage in San Francisco? Because it's really fucking expensive to live here. You know why there's not enough teachers to teach in Harlem? Because it's really expensive to live in New York City. There's a lot of service workers who are generally, I think, underappreciated, underpaid for their work. They can't live in New York. Young people who want to start in finance or in entertainment or media can't move to New York. Queer people, people we want to support culturally, artists, dancers, musicians can't live in New York. And so it cuts off all the things that make a city great in the first place. Cities used to be in the post-World War II era, the place you move to get economic opportunity. You move to the city to get access to a great job because cities are where value is created. And so even if you were a janitor in New York City and you were living in New York, that means your kids probably went to New York City schools. They were probably around other kids of different means, and they would get access to more opportunities. So even if you were still a janitor, they're going to do much better than you. Now cities, due to crazy policies like rent control, are not escalators to opportunity. They cut off access to opportunity. They are places that are exclusionary. It's places where rich people move to and force other people and force other people out. And the worst part about all this, the part that we agree on, is that it's like a bias. I think cities have become exclusionary, and the people who live there are generally Democrats, and they dress up what I think are racist, classist views on who should live in the city, or at least around them, with the language and the symbolism of like liberalism. They drape themselves in the pride flag and in the Ukrainian flag and condescend to other people who I think are just more open about their racist beliefs, typically Republicans, when they themselves don't want to live around Black people. They don't want to live around queer people. They don't want to live around poor people. Cities have flipped in their value in a way that is destroying our country, where they used to be escalators of opportunity, and now they're like stores of value, where you can only live there if you're super, super rich, and good luck if you want to if you're anything else.
So it's funny that you say that, because I was thinking about Aaron Peskin, right? And I know this kind of brings it back to San Francisco, but he's a longtime supervisor in San Francisco that kind of, identifies as a democratic socialist. But everybody also knows that he has a big fat house in the city overlooking the bay. And he actually literally passed legislation in San Francisco to make sure that his view would be secured for the remainder of his lifetime, and that he wouldn't allow buildings taller than 4 stories to be built all along that side of the bay, right, in the waterfront. And So someone coined the term, I forget if it was you or maybe Gary Tan, somebody basically said, or maybe it was Armand who was on our show a few weeks back, that he wants the city frozen in amber. And so it always kind of it makes me scratch my head and wonder, it's like, how can you be a democratic socialist that's all about redistribution of wealth, right? Which is what you hear all these young people gravitating towards these days because they feel already kind of oppressed by the system, and capitalism kind of run amok. You hear that all the time, and people that have already got theirs, right?
Yeah.
Like he's a millionaire, and he pulled up his ladder already too. But then they can sit there and espouse these socialist values, but they already have all this money. It's like, how can the far left or the socialists, whoever, how do they reconcile that? Like, I don't really know what the question is, but it's like people like him, there's a whole lot of them in San Francisco. Like Bernal Heights is full of people that own $3 million homes that are retired.
Yeah.
Okay. That made their money, that literally think like Chesa Bodine was like God's gift to San Francisco. Like, how did we get there?
Yeah, I think it comes back to like, do you think the pie is going to grow or do you think the pie is going to shrink? And I think if you do I think that people in Bernal Heights who basically have excluded people of color from living in their neighborhood are actually racist? No, I believe that they are authentically liberal and that they want great outcomes for everybody. But I think that NIMBYism is a cold, hard economic calculus that's about getting yours. And to say that if there's not enough housing, and the system is broken, I don't think the system's going to change. How do I make my home more valuable over time? And I think that's by preventing more housing from getting built. I think it is possible to have both. I think that we can retain the value of people's homes and retain the community character of our neighborhoods and build more housing for people. There's a lot of neighborhoods in San Francisco that are not very pretty. There's a lot of underutilized space. I was just driving down Geary yesterday, and they finally built like one 6 to 8 story apartment building on Geary. And if for those of people who don't live in San Francisco or haven't been to the West Side, like Geary is not a nice boulevard. Sorry for anyone who lives on Geary, but there's like furniture stores and tire shops. It's not like it's a thriving like thoroughfare. It's just right now a way to get from A to B. And when I saw this new building, I was like, wow, I could imagine Geary being lined with nice new buildings with actual retail on the street, wider sidewalks, trees, pedestrians walking down along the street. And I was like, oh, Geary could feel like a neighborhood eventually, not just a thoroughfare. I think the same thing is true for Soma or for Van Ness. And those are places where people don't live now. They're like warehouses, they're car dealerships. It's not like you're disturbing a neighborhood. And so I think it's possible, even in a fairly dense place like San Francisco, for us to continue to build housing here that accommodates new people without destroying the value of the housing and the communities that people already live in.
Let's talk a little bit about abundance and this whole movement of abundance. And lately I've been noticing, because I think Ezra Klein, right?
Yeah.
So, he releases this book, and it becomes kind of like he's going on all the talk shows and major news networks and podcasts and talking about abundance. And then now, kind of like clockwork, the kind of the hard left folks have come along, and they're basically saying that this is just another way to exclude people, right? That this is just another way this is actually NIMBYism, right? They've completely flipped, their argument is completely opposite. Like, can you just talk for a minute about what the kind of the basic premises behind the abundance movement? And do you think that is the future for the Democratic Party as a way to kind of recapture the national landscape? Because, they're on the outs for the next few years, but the midterms are coming, and maybe if they can find someone that's not named Tim Walz to run for president.
What do you have against Tim Walz?
Well, how much time do we have? Sorry. I have strong feelings about certain people that are at the higher ups of the Democratic Party. I think the Democratic Party is really ripe for change and ripe for new leadership to come in. And I look, the idea of abundance appeals to me. It's like more is better, right? Don't we all want to have more? Like I want to have a full belly and a warm house and a place to live where my kids can grow. And like, don't you want those things, right? That to me, that's abundance. So could you talk a little bit about abundance and kind of what that means for the country, and is that potentially a future that the Democrats can get behind?
What? I don't know if I don't, I wouldn't classify myself as an abundance bro in that I don't think I'm like just a disciple of Ezra and Derek, although I think they wrote a great book. My theory on it is, I think the most important question every election cycle is like, do you feel like you're better now versus 4 years ago? And generally, do you feel like the country's on the right track versus the wrong track? I think that's when most people get into the ballot box at the end of the day. That's what they're really asking themselves, like which candidate is going to provide a better future for me and my family. Um, and I think it's a huge problem that over the last 30 or 40 years, most Americans have felt continually like their lives are getting worse and that they are left behind, and that the country is on the wrong track. And it's strange that that doesn't correlate with general economic indicators. Our economy has been ripping, like it's doing better than it ever has. And Donald Trump has targeted globalization and trade deals as the problem. But I think what globalization has largely done is actually reduce the cost of cheaper goods. So you can now buy a TV or a cell phone or junk food cheaper than ever. But what globalization didn't do is reduce the cost of expensive goods. So housing, education, healthcare, childcare, the things that actually generate wealth. Buying a TV doesn't make you a richer person. Going to college does. Uh, buying an iPhone doesn't make you a richer person, but staying healthy and not going into the healthcare system, that does make you wealthier because it allows you to actually work. Healthcare, the cost of healthcare has exploded. The cost of housing has exploded. The cost of childcare has exploded. And those things have prevented people in the middle class, because the cost has gone up and because wages haven't gone up. People feel legitimately like they're falling behind because they can't afford things that they used to afford. So yeah, one party, Donald Trump's solution is let's close down the borders. And so then we're going to make socks in America again. And, everyone's wages are going to go up because we're going to have jobs for everyone.
Right.
I don't think that's the right solution. I don't think it's about just wage growth. I think it's also about reducing the cost of expensive goods. And I think that's what the abundance movement is about. Capitalism, I'm a capitalist. I think capitalism is one of the greatest inventions to ever help society. But capitalism is like an engine. It can go in any direction you want it to go in, even the wrong one. And this has happened during like huge bubbles, like the housing crisis, the Great Recession, or what happened in the 80s. You need a driver of that engine. You need somebody to say, like, where should we put the train? And I think that's the role of our elected officials. That's the role of government, is to establish like what do we want our country to be or look like? Like what should our priorities be? And I think both Biden and Trump have both embraced this a bit of kind of like economic nationalism, of saying, well, what are our strategic priorities for our country? For example, we want to manufacture high-end chips for AI in the United States versus elsewhere. I think being a leader in clean energy, or even being an exporter, a net exporter of gas and oil, like these are potential national priorities that we could focus capitalism towards solving. And I think we could do that with housing. We could do that with healthcare. We could do that with high-end jobs, if we had government officials who embrace that. And so I think what the abundance movement is really about is saying like, hey, we think it's important for people to have access to high quality, low cost housing and healthcare and childcare. And we want to use the forces of capitalism through the rails of our democracy to go solve those problems for people. And we believe that democracy plus capitalism can lead to a better world. Peter Thiel talks a lot about this. I don't agree with him on some stuff, but our government used to be about the future, like talking about, like, if you look at speeches from Roosevelt or from Truman or from Eisenhower, even through LBJ with the Great Society, like there was a vision for what the country was going to be. And then somewhere along the way, we started talking less about the future and more about the past. Like literally entitlement programs are about what are we entitled to based on our previous actions. We stopped talking about like what kind of country we want to live in, and we started talking a lot more about what we're all owed. And so I think we stopped focusing on how do we grow the pie and more on how do we divide what we have. And yeah, it's important to, of course, protect our seniors and all that. But that's not a country that leads the 21st century is not one that just focuses on the past. It's one that focuses on the future. And I think that's what Ezra and Derek get right. And I think to me, abundance as an idea shouldn't be a democratic idea. I think whoever wins the next couple cycles is going to be a politician from either party that paints a vision for the future. And I think Donald Trump kind of had a coherent theory of this. I don't think it's going to work. But he was able to diagnose, state a problem that felt real to people, point to some ills like that had some data behind them, like immigration or trade imbalances. I don't think those are the right, those aren't the right root causes to the problems that he identified. I think he identified the right problems. But I think the politicians that win are going to be politicians that paint a picture of an America we all want to live in.
Yeah. I mean, abundance means more for all of us, right? And that's
what people want. It's not like, I think people they want more shit. They want better shit. They want cheaper shit.
Right.
For them and their families.
Right.
And not necessarily for other people. And that's where Democrats talking about redistribution or like, you can help poor people. You can help marginalized people without, I think, like taking something away from richer people. Right. And I think they focus so much on, equity, that it makes people feel like they're going to lose something if they elect Democrats. And I think and again, how do you do both? You grow the pie. And so it's about more.
I think having more and growing the pie reduces that resentment that seems to be building, especially in the millennials, and some of the Gen Z population too. There's some resentment, like they already feel defeated, and so they're doing things like not having kids and things like that. And I think that that if everybody's happy and everybody's making money and everybody can afford things, then we can actually get on with the things that bring us joy in our life, right? And I think we need to get back to that.
I don't know why this is so hard for politicians. I mean, I know why it's hard. I was a systems engineer in college, and so I often approach problems of trying to understand, like, well, how did we get here? What are the incentives or the structures or the norms that lead to this systematically? Because I often don't think it's not about people, especially not about individuals. People are just responding to their circumstances, and so it's so interesting to me that like an entire class of people, like our professional politicians, are so like, what is it about the system that is broken that are leading all of these smart people who are ambitious and probably want to help and do good to say the wrong things and do the wrong things? Like, why is it so hard to understand basic truths about crime or homelessness or housing in San Francisco and just do the things that, like, if I go to a smart person, sitting at dinner and I'm like, hey, what do you think we should do on crime? Do you think we should arrest people? Like, I think 90% of people would say yes.
Say yes. Yeah.
But yet, like 90% of our politicians are vehemently against it. Like, where does that discrepancy come from? I think it's that they're not living in the real world. Yeah, I mean, people make fun of like Donald Trump not knowing how much eggs cost. But I think like most politicians aren't like real people.
Yeah.
And they're living in this perverse system where they're incentivized to say and do things that the party wants, but the party's not led by anyone necessarily. It's just this like amorphous thing that distorts ideas over time. And so they start believing in a set of things that are divorced from reality and data and people's experiences. And that leads to bad outcomes and results, which leads to a lot of resentment and, throw the bums out. And this is true right now. My party, the Democrats, are on the outs, but like, this is going to, I bet you, we talked about this a lot. Like, I bet you in 2 years, people are going to be fucking furious with Trump and the Republicans, and it's going to be the scales will flip. And I think the danger is for Democrats to just treat this as like, hey, we're going to ride on the inevitable backlash he's going to get to hit the failure of his policies, without really thinking about, again, like what is our vision for this country? Like, what is our vision for San Francisco? What's our vision for California? And I don't see that kind of critical thinking happening. Actually, Mayor Lurie is great, but certainly at a state level in California,
right?
Outside of some people like Scott Wiener, I don't see a lot of like future-looking ideas coming out that inspire people.
I think at the federal level too, the Democrats at the federal level are looking old, and that's an issue. And I know Trump's old too, but like the coattails from what happened with Biden, and then you look at Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and I met Nancy Pelosi, super respect that lady, man, but she's 83 or 82. It's like, Come on, man. My mom's like 89. Like they're in that same generation. That generation that still has memories of World War II. I mean, that's a long time ago now. So
Yeah, and I mean we're old, and I think we're elite, and we're coastal. If we want to win, this is a staggering fact because of the population shifts in America. Even if a Democrat were to win, all of the swing states, or the same map that I think Biden won in 2020, that wouldn't be enough with the impending shift in the electoral college to win future elections, because states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee and North Carolina are going to keep growing at the expense of electoral college votes from California and Michigan, Illinois, New York. And so we need to figure out how to win elections in purple states and in red states. We need to figure out how to talk to people
yeah,
in those places and also represent them well. And I even think it's about like, we Upblaze, I think I call it Southwest Airlines because we serve people both on the coast, but also a lot of people in the middle of this country. We serve people in Florida and Texas. And I talked to a mom yesterday in Indiana, and I talked to a wedding photographer in Pittsburgh, and I talked to a drone operator in Texas. We serve everybody. And there's people that are, California is a red state and a blue state at the same time. And there's people just 30 minutes from here who have a lot more in common with folks in Idaho than they do with people in San Francisco. And I think, we often like talk about red states as if it's like a whole world away, but I think there is red states and purple states right here in our own backyard. And I think we need to learn how to talk to these people and solve problems for them if we want to win elections again. And I hope that there's a lot of good people out there doing that work, because I think that's our path back.
well, on that note, I'm gonna wrap it up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. That was a great conversation, full of hope and also some challenges for us going forward as a nation. Lots of work to do, and the next few years are going to be very interesting to see how it all shakes out. Thanks again for the great conversation. I'm Tom Wolf. That's Adam Nathan. This is Fast Times, and we will see you next time.